Well, it's been over a half a year since I put out the last review. In that time I've been making other stuff, been busy with school and work, and just generally procrastinating. So, I'm sorry for betraying my small audience. I also decided to separate my videos, since the audience of these videos and my translation of the random stuff would be different, and these require a lot more work anyway, so hence, the new challenge for specifically video essays. I want to make a variety of things for different reasons, not just focus on one thing, so I think this separation is for the best. Since I don't want to try doing a weekly series again, especially after how quickly that failed last time, this series will now be called LaserVision Reviews and will cover a wider range of media and time. In regards to media, I'll still be mostly covering Japanese animation, but I also want to cover other things like Hollywood movies. In regards to time, I want to cover more than just the bubble era, and cover the latter 30 years of the 20th century and maybe a bit of the early 2000s. My aim for this is to cover a broad swath of latter century film and television. I'm working on game content as well, but that's beyond the scope of this series. With that all out of the way, let's get right into the review. One of my favorite arcade games is the classic Sega game from 1986, Outrun. In the time it took me to put out this video, I've now bought Outrun on Nintendo Switch, and bought or played Pole Position 1 and 2, Virtua Racing, Ridge Racer 5, and Gran Turismo 4, so I'm now quite the fan of racing games. Much like its contemporaries by the same team and on similar hardware, such as Afterburner and Space Harrier, Outrun was quite the graphical stunner, but there is something special about Outrun in particular. Take Afterburner for example. It gives you the exhilarating experience of being part of the recently released film Top Gun, with perhaps the best and most surreal flight simulation yet seen in video games. But you could argue the way it achieves this is quite simplistic, and maybe even one note, regardless of the quality of the game. It's the speed alone that helps achieve this feeling of being a fighter pilot. On the other hand, there's Outrun. Lead designer Yu Suzuki spent some time on the American West Coast doing research, and the results of that are plain to see. Get into the groove of the game and it truly feels like you're putting the pedal to the metal down the roads of Southern California. The bright blue skies, the waving palm trees, the sunlight glistening on the water, the salty smell of the coastal summer breeze. Well, I suppose you wouldn't be able to smell the game, but that aside, the whole vibe of the game makes you really feel like you're driving under the Californian sunshine. The setting, and city pop tunes, and the 5 pixels of Hot Babe. The gameplay too was quite innovative, as much like Doom nearly a decade later, previous racing games only had simple tracks with no verticality, which Outrun included, so it was making the feeling of going up and down the inclines quite fun. Today I'll be taking a look at the 1989 OVA Riding Bean, which is actually quite similar. Riding Bean is quite literally a Hollywood action film of the time, with a little bit of anime pizzazz, for both better and worse. Riding Bean is an action manga that had a short-lived run of just 4 chapters in Monthly Comic Noisy from September 1988 to February 1989, penned by Kenichi Sonoda, who'd later most famously work on Bubblegum Crisis and its sequel Bubblegum Crash as a character and mech designer. While the manga was cancelled alongside the closure of the magazine, an anime OVA loosely based on the premise and characters was released on February 22, 1989. While the subject of my last review is entirely unknown outside of Japan, Riding Bean was licensed for release in the United States by Animego in 1990, who later gained great success for the releases of Urusei Yatsura, Bubblegum Crisis, and Kimagure Orange Road. Animego would later release an English dub in 1994. Currently, the OVA is available legally from a few streaming services including Retro Crush, but not for free, and was released on Blu-ray in 2017. The plot of this OVA is quite a bit simpler and dependent on in-the-moment excitement, so I won't give a detailed early plot summary this time. Riding Bean sees titular white-knuckle driver Bean Bandit and his female roommate, the gun-slinging Rally Vincent, as they get framed for the kidnapping of a young girl who's the daughter of the owner of a large conglomerate. The characterization of both is somewhat one-note and intended to make the male audience excited. That said, the characterization of Rally isn't demeaning, despite the inclusion of a dress-up scene, so I don't mind this. As for Bean, I would have disliked if his baddish presentation was done in service to demeaning women. You might wonder, why would I have this constantly in mind? 80s OVAs are known for plenty of great and terrible things due to their hyper-focus on male nerds, as the otaku subculture crystallized into what we know it as today. And a large motivation for using the OVA format is to do things you wouldn't want parents to stumble upon, and sadly, that is where the OVA falters. But first, what was good about the OVA? A lot. I compared it to Outrun earlier, and that's because it truly utilizes the meat of animation to realize a Hollywood action flick style story. The animation is stellar, in particular the shootout scenes. The way the bullets tear into their targets and the expressions of the characters involved twist and contort is truly a sight to behold. It's like watching a scene from a Tarantino movie with a little bit of unrealisticness that animation can afford. And honestly, that's what I seek from animation and fiction as a whole. All this is paired with American rock music, and it truly did feel like I was watching a classic action flick. I don't watch these sorts of things often since I'm not really a fan of it, but there really is a charm to seeing the tropes of a genre come together in nearly perfect sync, doing what they do best. And it's why I'm a big fan of some action series to this day. This is a OVA at its best, chase scenes, shootouts, etc. that all play up the strengths of the two main characters. It really is a blast at its best, but unfortunately, it's not all there. I think everything in a narrative should have purpose, no matter how small or big, questionable or wholesome. The way I see it, why do something if there's no real point? And that's how I view the nudity at the beginning and the main villain.
Trying to strike a chord and it's probably A minor.
The beginning is pretty small in the grand scheme of things, but it still feels like the woman is being exploited for the sake of the audience's stares. There's absolutely no reason for her to be naked. The main villain, however, is a lot worse. She's an abusive lesbian pile that has another villain afflicted with Stockholm Syndrome stuck to her like a dog. That is quite the sandwich of things to hate about the villain, and it doesn't really go anywhere, aside from the scene which addresses Bean's reason for helping the kidnapped child. There honestly was no reason he had to go that far with the character, and I find this exploitation way worse than the fanservice at the beginning with Raleigh. That said, while this is a pretty large issue, it was basically my only one with the OVA as a whole. A couple years later, in February 1991, Sonoda would helm a new manga until June 1997, Gunsmith Cats, which is apparently well known. I myself knew about it before this whole thing, but that is no marker of popularity. Gunsmith Cats treats the previous work as a sort of prototype, and features a new Raleigh, who, alongside her roommate, operates a gun shop and works as a bounty hunter. Bean even seems to appear here and there as both an ally and an enemy as the story suits it. Gunsmith Cats would see a 3-episode OVA series produced during the manga's run from November 1st, 1995 to September 1st of the following year. Both versions of the series would also see an English release a few years later, but would see some controversy due to the sex contained in the manga, which would halt its English serialization temporarily. Today, the entire manga is available from Dark Horse Comics under an 18+ rating, and the anime's license is currently owned by Animega. The manga also included making-of materials and the entirety of the Writing Bean manga, which I took a cursory look at, and found that personally, it was a little too gratuitous and exploitative for my liking. Gunsmith Cats 2 may or may not be to my liking, but I'm interested in checking it out. All in all, this was a very fun anime to watch from start to finish, warts and all. While I personally preferred Borders over this, I say that thus far in my video reviews, this is easily the most recommendable to most people, despite the otaku fan service. I've seen a lot worse, and visually at least, it doesn't go far enough where I'd be hesitant to recommend this. I'll have to check out Gunsmith Cats as well, but perhaps another day when I'm in the mood for sexy ladies and not taking things too seriously.